first Monday in February every year. I took that oath of office for 20, 22, 21, whatever number of years it was that I worked for the city of Quincy in various capacities. And that's when the term of office begins. And I quoted the sections from chapter 43, which is the plan of government. People commonly refer to it as the city charter. It's not technically a charter, but it's a term of art that everybody uses. It's a plan, our plan, and it says the municipal year starts at an organizational meeting held on the first Monday of January at 10 o'clock in the forenoon. So that's when the term of office begins. If there's a vacancy from that point forward in the next 12 months, pursuant to the 2004 Act, it has to be a special election. And also in the 1984 Act, that was the same provision. With respect to a council-elect that dies after the election and before the term of office commences, that's addressed in the 1953 Act. No conflict of that provision with the 1984 or the 2004 Act. If the vacancy occurs between the election and the start of the term, the runner-up gets the seat. And it dictates that the city council shall, and shall is a term that's mandatory in nature, within 15 days of being notified of the vacancy by the city clerk, they shall appoint the runner-up, or the person who got the next highest number of votes in the prior election, as the councilor for that term. That was the legislation that was cited as authority for the city council to act when there was a vacancy in 2011, when the city councilor from Ward 2 resigned. If he had resigned in the first 12 months of his office, there would have been a special election. But it was in the second year of office. It didn't conflict with the 1984 or the 2004 Special Act, so it reverts back to the 1953 Act. You have 15 days to appoint a successor for the balance of the term. The 1953 Act says you have 15 days to act from being advised, and it says the city clerk shall, as soon as practicable, after the remaining councilors have taken the oath of office, shall inform them of the vacancy, and they shall have 15 days to act. Today's the 15th day. If the city council fails to act, that responsibility reverts to, not reverts, but it goes to the mayor. And it would be the mayor's responsibility to do that. It's my belief that there should not be a special election. It's my belief, and I do not use the word entitled. That's a very poor choice of terminology, and it was picked up by the newspaper, I believe. I don't believe I used the term entitled. I don't believe Mr. Harris used the term entitled. I think the legislation requires the city council shall appoint the person who got the next highest number of votes in the election. And the election was just 2 months ago. Councilman McNamee, unfortunately, was a good friend of mine, as he was with many people in this room. Councilman McNamee passed away in the 2014 to 2015 term. It was 12 days prior to the inauguration. The vacancy did not occur in the 2016 to 2017 term. So it's not a case of a special election. It's the case of, and again, there's no conflict from the 1953 legislation. That's the only act that talks about what happens between the time of the election and the commencement of the term of office. And that's what should cover. And I think that's basically it. There's one other councilor, Solicitor Timmons, to make a comment that there seems to be a school of thought that all special acts are wiped out when a new plan of government is adopted. And I'd like to give you 3 examples in Quincy why that would probably not be a pretty good idea to adopt that. We have a licensing board that was adopted by a 1949 special act of the legislature. And it says the licensing board shall consist of police chief, fire chief, city clerk, building inspector, which is now called the Inspector of Building, Director of Inspection Services and Health Commissioner. In Chapter 138, which is the liquor licensing statute, there's a provision that says in every city there will be a licensing board and will consist of 3 residents appointed by the mayor as members of the licensing board. And they have to be residents of the community. Now, we have 3 members of the licensing board who are not residents of the community. And I know in the past, somebody has challenged at the ABCC the makeup of the City of Quincy licensing board. Well, if as Mr. Timmons suggested, that there's some thought that all special acts are wiped out when a change in the plan of government is adopted, well, we haven't had a proper licensing board then since 1949, if that's the case. I don't believe that's the case, but he suggested that there's some thought that that would be that should be the case, or it might be the case. I also point out that we have 1900 special act in the legislature that establishes the City of Quincy Board of Assessors. We have 3 members. Well, we've had 3 changes of government, or two changes of government since 1900. We went to Plan E for about 8 or 10 years in the 50s, and then went back to Plan A in 1957 or 58. Is he saying that we haven't had a proper board of assessors since 1947? I don't think so. And there's also a special act of the legislature from 1880 that authorizes the town of Quincy to establish the Thomas Crane Public Library. Now, in 1888, the City of Quincy became a city. Again, it went to Plan E, went back to Plan A. Does that mean that we don't have a library? Well, I certainly don't think so. So that, these are, 3 examples of, obviously why the special acts that have been adopted in the past do not get wiped out with this changes that's going on. So, with that, I guess that's all I have to say. I think Mr. Harris does have, I'm not going to use the term entitled, but under the provisions of the 1953 Act, I think the City Council shall appoint him as the councilor for the term. And again, it really does come down, if this does end up in court, and that's certainly a decision that has to be made, Mr. Harris will be making that decision depending on what action the council takes. But if we do end up before the court, the question really does seem to be, did the vacancy occur when Council McNamee didn't show up for inauguration, or did it occur when he died? And I hate to use the term that way, but the vacancy occurred on December 23rd, 2015, when Ryan McNamee passed away. Yeah, anybody has any questions or if I can clarify anything, I'd be glad to. If not, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McRitchie, and thank you for sticking to, as Councilman noted, the law and really advocating for your position and your legal positions. So thank you very much. I know 2 people want to speak. I do want to just ask a question and solicitor at my mind at this point, just before anybody speaks, regarding our questions of Mr. McRitchie and our statements now. Would they be admissible, and could they affect any litigation that would possibly happen as a result of this?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, so out of an abundance of caution, I would say, I would advise that no one say anything, as lawyers do in all instances.
Thank you.
And may I just clarify, all Mr. Timmons said earlier about the city charter, lest we have a concern that there is going to be chaos on Main Park Street tomorrow morning, was that an assistant city solicitor said something to me about the city charter. If you read my opinion, which I've given to Mr. McRitchie, I've given to all of you, I specifically say that Chapter 321, for purposes of this analysis, has not been preempted by the city charter. I didn't get into the question of the whole city charter matter, mostly because of the license board thing and a few other questions, and I didn't think it was before me. I relied on the language of 2004. So I hope there won't be concern. I saw that Clerk Shea was looking to call, get some of his members moving to Quincy here on his cell phone, you need on tonight, all right? That's a non-issue.
Okay. Thank you. Not having been heard previously, Councilor LaForest.
Thank you, Madam President. Now I'm a bit concerned about how my question is going to be interpreted, but Solicitor General is free to stop it if you think it should be. So, Mr. Ritchie, thank you. I think you should be on the charter committee if we ever do take up that. We've got a lot of volunteer service to the community. So, two things that you mentioned as referencing councilors who served in the last term and are now here today. You said that, after last fall, there were incumbents or a councilor-elect. I would think that there was possibly, so with Mr. Councilor McNamee passing during December, there was a vacancy in his 2015 term. However, this talks about the vacancy during the current term, which doesn't occur until there are two different terms. That could have been two different people, right? So it wouldn't have been ruled the same because of the rollover. He happened to get reelected.
My point in taking.
So when you reference the inauguration swearing in, that term did not begin when that inauguration until those hands went up.
That's correct. So my point is that the vacancy occurred back in 2015.
Different term.
That's right. That's right. And the special
So that's
act in 2004 says if a vacancy occurs within the first 12 months of the term.
Right. Two different terms. Two different
That's right. So
two different terms, two different vacancies.
that's right. The vacancy occurred. This is the discussion that was tonight. The vacancy occurred. The vacancy did not occur in the first 12 months of the 2016 2017.
So I guess I would be in this position that there was a vacancy into the 2015 term. That term could have expired, you could have had a different candidate.
And
By the time you raise your right hand, that's when your term begins. When that term, on inauguration day, that term was vacated on that day because nobody was there in presence.
I would say the vacancy was, and I'll use the Latin term, it's ab initio. It was vacant at the beginning of the term. It did not occur during the first 12 months of the term.
It did, because you're saying the term begins when you raise your right hand. If no one's in that chair to raise that right hand, that seat has been vacated.
That's correct.
At that moment. In that moment, that term does not begin until that moment.
The vacancy occurred.
Thank you. I tend to defer my legal opinions to Council Palmucci's.
But that's the issue, that if we end up before a judge, the issue will be when did the vacancy occur?
Right, so.
And the vacancy was caused by the death of Council McNamee. With all due respect to Council McNamee. But
The vacancy of 2015 occurred at the death of Councilor McNamee. The vacancy of 2016 occurred when McNamee was not present.
that's right. And
Those are two different.
But
He was then, right?
But the 1933 legislation specifies that if a councilor-elect dies, this is how the vacancy would be filled.
I think we've then gone with simpler language, Solicitor General. That's, I appreciate your time here this evening.
Thank you.
All set, thank you.
Okay. There's a motion to move the question. So let's take
On the motion to move the question.
Sorry, sir.
On the motion to move the question.
On the motion, the question cannot be discussed. So can be discussed. Okay, very well. Mr. Palmucci, Councilor Palmucci.
I just wanted to make a statement. I was going to ask Quincy any questions. I wanted to make a statement, very brief statement. So I'll be voting against moving the question so that I can have an opportunity to simply make a statement relative to what he said.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Clerk, can you call the roll on?
This is Council Law 2016-011. Okay, on moving the question, all in favor?
Aye. No.
All opposed?
No.
All right, I'll take a roll call vote. I'm sorry, I thought it was on.
Sorry.
On moving the question, Council Kane.
Yes.
Council Kroll.
Yes.
Council DeBona.
Yes.
Council Finn.
No.
Council Flores.
No.
Council Yang.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
Council Finn. Council Palmucci.
No.
President Hughes.
Yes.
4 to 4, the motion fails.
Council Pelletier.
Thank you. I wish we could give out gold stars here.